All right. So, I don't really think he needs much of an introduction, but we are very happy that we have RIUM plus, RIUM plus, depending on who you talk to, whether it's Rand or not.
There's no correct pronunciation. It's never designed to be said aloud.
Oh, beautiful. So we have this fella here all the way from Australia to talk about one of his wonderful projects and kind of some more details about that. So I'll hand it over to him.
So hi. So I'm Mike, and I have the username that was never designed to be said, so no one knows how to pronounce it. It has symbols in it, so that way it doesn't work on a lot of characters and whatever else, websites and things. Yeah, I'm from... What was that? Closer to your mouth. Closer? There we are, now you can hear me. Okay.
Oh, good day!
Crikey, mate! So yeah, I'm from Brisbane, Australia. It's a long flight to get here, and there's a running reputation amongst my friends that I'm a time-traveling mad scientist, and some people think that's more true than others. And if you're wondering why that is, this is my car. I did actually import a DeLorean to Australia and got the steering wheel swapped over and everything like that. So I drive a DeLorean. I collect radioactive isotopes. I used to have my own personal satellite before, it entered its controlled re-entry a few years ago, and I really love potatoes. So something more interesting about me that most people may not know was that a few years ago, I was on Australia's #1 top reality TV show, actually #1 non-news TV show at all, Beauty and the Geek Australia, where I snuck on a whole bunch, clicky thing's not working. Snuck on a whole bunch of Myst shirts that I managed to get on show, so, that's a bit fun for this. So why am I up here? Yeah, I do all sorts of things in the Myst community over the years. So, I run the Riven Journals, which are a series of puzzle games designed for Internet Explorer 3 and Netscape Navigator 2 in 1997. If you happen to know how to convert Java to JavaScript, I'd really love your help, because they're still using the old Java applets, so anyone want to talk to me about that, be very appreciative. Other things I presented here at past Mysteriums include a fully mechanical 25-hour dunny clock that I built and presented in 2009. Probably best known for the real Myst book that I made in 2012 and presented that. Full computer inside that's fast enough to run Half-Life 2 at 30 frames a second. It doesn't sound that impressive today, but back then this thing went absolutely insane in publicity on everywhere it was. And actually Cyan used that book as the texture reference for Real Myst Masterpiece Edition, because their one was not in good condition or available at the time. So yeah, I've had my stuff featured in all sorts of places around the world, everything from the Smithsonian Institute, who called it a wormhole book, but I will, forgive them for that one. And even more prestigious places, such as my mum's sewing room. So, different ones, whatever else. So this is going to be a bit of an interactive feedback, because I've not really recorded everything and I've not really prepared too much on this, because I wanted to hang out with people rather than practice my lines. So I'll need to take a few votes quickly just to see what people can get for feedback. So you need to be quick, raise your hands. There's so many people here, I literally can't see individuals, so don't be shy about putting your hand up. So let's go first one. Who thinks Atris is a bad parent? So it looks like maybe 3/4 of the audience. Okay, second one. Who thinks it's not fair that Atris is always blamed when Catherine must have been equally absent the whole time? Okay, so let's do a different type of vote. I just want to see the range of people. So we'll do a vote on who thinks they can understand dunny numbers. So I'll say a number 1 to 5. Put your hand up when it is. 1 is not at all. 5 is you're completely literate. And again, I can't see individuals here, so don't be shy about whatever you say. So who's a 1? Okay, we got a few. Who's a 2? We've got less than the 1s. How about a 3? We're getting more. And what about a 4? Even more. Okay, what about 5? We've got a few people like that there. Okay, so now I know that. Okay, final question. Who thinks that they could build whatever is under there? We have two. Well, I got to be a surprise for you. Everyone else in this audience is probably wrong. This project has been different to other ones. I'm specifically designed it to be low tech and low skill and low effort and cheap. Takes a while, but everything else is different. So there's no complexities in this one like the other ones, like custom ordering motherboards from Broadcom's Advanced Research Division or anything like that. So the big question is, what actually is it? Like, I kept this one a complete secret, so no one from Cyan and no one from the committee actually knows what is under there, just because I like to keep secrets and mysteries and whatever else. So before I say this, I should say one thing. 4 days ago, the thing under there started having signal integrity issues. So it's not fully working all the time right now. I could have fixed it, but it would be like 3 hours in my hotel room alone, and I'm only here for a few hours, a few days, so I decided to spend the time with friends rather than alone in the hotel room fixing it. So it may start or stop working during it, but at least half of it should be working. Anyway, so without further ado, monolith from 2001 Space Odyssey.
That's why it doesn't work.
Oh, Jesus. So, knocking it over made it work again. That was not working before. So this thing is what I am calling a surface and dunny time chronometer. There's a photo of it up close for those who can't see it. There'll be plenty of photos and videos in these slides because, you know, not everyone's in the front 2 rows. Why is it chronometer and a lot of clock? Well, the difference is basically the accuracy and precision. This thing is accurate to within 0.003 of a second, and it'll never drift beyond that. It's self-setting, self-correcting, self-adjusting. You literally just apply power and go, and it does everything else itself. And there's no battery inside it keeping it as a real-time clock or anything, so it does everything like that. The digits on the bottom are not just the top time translated. That is the actual time in the cavern. Well, it would be if the clocks on Uru's servers were set correctly, but you know, yeah, they're off by a few minutes. But you know, it is what it is. So this thing has 14 chips in it, 17 circuit boards, 450 intermodule connections, but that doesn't actually mean it's that complex. It's a lot of the same thing, is just over and over and over again. So yeah, so this talk is not how I built this like I've done in the past. This is how you could build something like this. So I'm going to try and go quickly through this as much as I can because I have a lot to cover. I'm just going to be saying names of things that you can use as reference. Check the stream of this later, and my slides and these notes and whatever else will be online later for everything else. So first up, a dunny number primer for anyone who's a little bit rusty on these things. Numbers 1 to 4 happen, and then numbers 5, 10, 15, 20 are the numbers rotated around, so that's what they look like. I'm not going to spend too long on this one. There's nothing like these displays anywhere on the market. Like, you could build tiny little LCD screens that display an image of it, but it just wouldn't really work. So I had to make my own. So this is the design that I came up with. I couldn't actually find any evidence of anyone making something like this. This is designed on the 7-segment displays, which are a standard component you see on the top of the thing. But these ones have been, you know, custom made to actually show dunny digits. There's the LEDs, there's diffusers, there's a gasket on top of them, whatever else, sealing and everything out. So we have an early prototype on the left that I was just testing things. And on the right, we have the final segment design. But I have a really important question here. I'm not going to provide any more context. Who spotted it? Anyone? Has anyone spotted it? Okay, I'll say something. Something's wrong. Has anyone spotted it? Oh, we got one. With two, maybe 3. Well, now I feel a lot better because I didn't spot it for literally months. I made an error in the number 20. So, where are we? See how that's there and that's there? 20 is supposed to go like that. And I accidentally put 20 like that. That took me like 6 freaking months to notice. You have no idea how many hundreds of hours were wasted because I got that wrong so early on. Like, oh my God. But failure is good. Like, failure is required to succeed. Like, you can't fail. If you're not failing every so often, then you're not pushing your boundaries. So it's kind of a good thing to every so often have something go wrong. I'll get into that later. Okay, so the actual digits themselves. I have to focus on these because I can't find any evidence of anyone making anything like this online. So the tech blogs and whatever else are going to want to pick these up. So basically, it's 2 layers of acrylic diffuser, acrylic with diffusing film inside it, 2 cardboard gaskets to seal in the light and active spaces, and a custom-made circuit board with LEDs on. And I know some people will be going at this point, I can't make any of these things. You know, that's just going to be crazy. It's nowhere near as difficult as you think. So let's just start at the beginning. You need a circuit. The full module, when it's all together, looks like that. You can kind of see the different layers on the side. The white thing on top is just protective paper to protect the acrylic so it doesn't get scratched before the final presentation. But to make something like that, the circuit board is what you need. Is you need a circuit board design. This looks like a lot of stuff, but it is literally the same thing over and over and over again. So there's the different segment numbers at the top and the bottom. These triangle things are LEDs, and so like some segments are bigger than others, so they have more LEDs and whatever else. This is just a logical diagram of voltage comes in, goes to LEDs, go to something that switches them. And as long as you understand how one of these works, you can pretty much understand how everything else on this works. It's just the same thing over and over again. This was designed in Easy EDA, which is the first thing I'm going to use. It's an EDA, electronic design automation software used for things like circuit board design that runs in your web browser and is fully free. So this whole, almost everything on this project was web browser based. So anyone can try this. It even works on your phone if you're game. And they have a lot of drag and drop stuff. They have a lot of automatic stuff to do things for you. They have pre-done libraries of components and everything else that you might want. So is there anything else on here? Just going through my notes. You get one of these, and then it turns into the actual layout. So this is the silk screen layout, which is just printed on top of the circuit boards to help me with aligning them. You can see all the little LEDs go around everywhere. This was designed in Inkscape, which is also free and open source and cross-platform, and thankfully not an unusable hunk of junk that is impossible to learn like the GIMP, if you've ever tried that software. So this gets printed on the circuit board, and you have the rough LED layout like that. Then once you've done that, you just put the LEDs in there. And from that previous slide, it had the connections of what is connected to what. So you can see the blue lines are where this should be connected to that, but it's not done yet. And I put a few of the traces in. But there's a thing called auto router that literally routes all the circuit patterns for you. You press a couple buttons and you get that. Like, I didn't draw that. That is just, it's all online. Like, it's a lot simpler when people actually have a go now, because like, oh my God, EDA software is so amazing these days. And again, it's all in a web browser. So where are we? I recommend using a local auto router on your computer, like you download and install it and it runs through your web browser, just because the cloud auto router takes like 15 minutes to get a result. Your local router does it in like 5 seconds. But once you've done that, where are we? So then you have to order the circuit boards and whatever else. Here's one with the circuit boards all done. Easy EDA integrates with JLC PCB, who are another. There's a bunch of places you can buy circuit boards online, but that's like one click to go from Easy EDA to JLC PCB. Easy EDA you can export from and go to someone else if you want. But to give you an example on price for these boards, I bought 10 of them for $13 US, and they arrived in my door in less than a week. So it's like, that's really well priced for what they are. So now you've got the circuit board, you've got to put the LEDs on them, which are just a bit small, and it's hard to get a sense of scale from a photo like this. So that's how small they are. Like, they are strictly tweezers only, because it's almost impossible moving with your fingers. These are super, super cheap, like less than 1 cent each in bulk. I buy them by the 1,000 because it's like $10 for 1,000. These are 0603 LEDs, which is 0.06 inches by 0.03 inches, as their name. So you sub 1 millimeter for positioning and whatever else, but they had to be so small to fit inside the segments. So this is it again with the LEDs all in place that you can see around the place. But anyone who's done soldering before would know that that's going to be pretty difficult to solder because they're so tiny. But there's a technique. You don't actually use a soldering iron anymore. There's one using solder paste and a reflow oven. So basically you get a stencil from when you're making the board from JLC PCB, which has just got little holes where all the pads are. You get a solder paste and you like squeeze it through the stencil on a credit card. It leaves some pads behind, and then you just use tweet scissors to put it on top. They don't actually have to be accurate, as you can see. Like, some of these are quite wonky. Surface tension will pull it all together to make it work once you get it heated up. Just has to be good enough. But if you're interested in what solder paste looks like up close, I have, a reasonable microscope, so like enhance, and we can go closer still. Solder paste is actually made up of tiny little balls of solder. So it's much easier to think of it as tiny balls in a suspension of oil than actually as a physical paste. If you get that, then you'll make it much easier to deal with installing them everywhere. So you can see them nice close up like that. And at this point, the microscope hit the LED. Soldering of that is not so difficult, but actually heating that solder up and melting it to make the connection sometimes is difficult. You use a reflow oven. but you can also use a frying pan, like literally. So solder paste melts. The one I bought was at around 140 degrees Celsius, which is 280 degrees Fahrenheit in crazy units. Yeah. So I can tell you now, don't use I have a thermal camera because I do, and that makes some things easier, but you don't need one of them. A spot IR thermometer is a bad thing. It won't get the right reading, but you just put a few drops of water in, time how long it takes to go from 0 to them boiling, add half of that again, you're at around 140 degrees. You just need a really flat place on your frying pan to make sure it works. Only leave it in the frying pan for like 10 minutes, so you want to, 10 seconds rather, you want to preheat it. You don't want to cook the LEDs. If they get too hot, they reduces their lifespan, they're darker. So it's, interesting failures can happen when you get something wrong though. Everyone I've shown that to, including people who actually work in electronics design for like decades, have never been able to figure out how I made that error. Like, what did you do to even get that pattern? Don't use baking paper that burns at below 140 degrees. So now if we look at this up close, you can see this one now, it's all melted in place. And this one, it's a bit of a perspective because it's looking down, but still you can see that it's pulled that thing fully straight. So even if you get only roughly right on the tweezers on it, the liquid surface tension will pull it all and specifically align it all, so that way it'll look the best. So now that we've got the LEDs done, we need to properly diffuse them so they don't just look like a bunch of point sources. But you can kind of see what it looks like in that one. This is another early design of the board. I didn't take photos and videos of everything on the new design with the fixed number 20. It's kind of just like as it works like that. You just switch them all on and off and blah, blah, blah. So now we need to make them not look like a bunch of point sources. We need to smooth that light out. I tried so many different things to smoothing them out. The easiest I found was to have acrylic diffusing things, just basically adding distance to it. So these were laser cut. Laser cutters are amazing. Local hackerspaces and makerspaces have them, but there's online places like Pinocchio that you can use just to order the stuff. It's really not that expensive for Pinocchio. In fact, my mechanical clock was all ordered from Pinocchio myself. So that's fully doable. These were then made out of black acrylic that was then airbrushed white on the inside and filled with resin at a 7:1 ratio with plaster powder to act as a diffuser. Just random stuff that had around the house or whatever else. But it worked pretty well. Where are we? I'll get more details on these once everything's done. But having a look at what it looks like, that's just a phone LED shining them up. But you can see that it's a single layer of diffuser. I ended up using 2 layers because it looked better. And the segments are lighting up very bright and diffusing pretty well. But you see there's a lot of blur and like it's bleeding over into the nearby segments. So we got to really make sure that light doesn't go anywhere in these segments. So we make little cardboard gaskets. That's what you got to do for gaskets, I think. So this is also laser cut, and it's made out of presentation board. Is in Australia. I don't know what they call it over here. Again, this is if you just have someone who has a laser cutter or a local hackerspace or makerspace, it's really quick to make these. But again, Pinocchio, if you don't have access, you can just order online and get stuff like this done. The black just cuts beautifully, finely, and crisply, but it is black, so you kind of got to wipe all the carbon dust off and then paint it white on the inside just to help with diffusing. But this also acts as a spacer, so that way the LEDs don't hit the acrylic. There's got to be something in between the two to seal it. But that seals all the light in pretty well. This is again, another prototype. The first time I got that working, this is only one layer of diffusing acrylic, and the segments aren't even filled with resin all the way. But even still, like it's working perfectly. Presentation board. So now that I show you that, here's the assembled module again, and now you can actually see all the individual layers in there like that, the 5-layer construction that makes thing up. Magic number, that, number 5. So what else have we got? Okay, so next one, what have we got? So that's what it looks like on the inside of this. And some people see that and go, oh God, that's so complex, there's no way I could do anything like that. But at the same time, if you look at that, you might see the same thing has repeated all over the place. And there's basically nothing in there that appears only once except for a few components. So we have like these pinky purple boards, there's 5 of them like that. We have 3 of the power supply boards, and even this big green board at the top, it's the same thing over and over and over again. So it looks complex at first, but when you break down into the complexity of what it is, it really is just do this once and then do the same thing over and over and over again. Every single pin that you see along here and here and here and around all of these boards, basically every single one of them goes to an individual LED string in one digit somewhere. So that's where the 450 connections come from. But actually, here's a good point. That's a lot of soldering. So who's done through-hole electronics soldering before? Okay, maybe 1 in a quarter of the audience. Okay, keep your hands up, and keep them up if you think that it's relatively easy enough that you think most other people in the audience could pick it up in maybe 15 minutes just for big through-hole components like resistors. Literally not a single person dropped their hand. So everyone else in the audience, it's one of those things where it's a bit intimidating because you're melting metal and whatever else, but it's actually, if it's like through-hole components, which this main board was all through-hole components, if you just give it a try, you'll find that it's one of those things that just happens to work really easily by hand. So where are we? So to hold all these in place, one more thing that was necessary, because I can't resist, 3D printed holders for those circuit boards. I could have bought ones, but I can print these for a couple cents each, and buying proper holders also takes time, shipping, whatever else. So these were modeled in Autodesk Fusion 360, which is free for hobbyist use if you're earning less than $100,000 a year from your work involving Fusion 360. So basically, unless you become really serious about using it, it's completely free. It has very good software, very good interface, good for both beginners, but it goes all the way through to fluid dynamic simulations and whatever else if you want to go that crazy. But you can use literally any 3D modeling software you want. You can use something like Tinkercad, which works in a web browser. It's just drag and drop, create everything like that. And these are really simple shapes. These are basically a solid rectangle with like little 2 cylinders on top of them. So, it's a really quick shape to knock this out. But you can use anything from Blender to Strata 3D if you are new or old school on that. I will say, though, I do not recommend getting your own 3D printer, and that's a bit of a controversial thing. 3D printers break down a lot. Like, it's not a matter of how much you spend. It won't break down. It's a matter of how often it breaks down and how easy they are to repair when they break down. So, yeah, I recommend finding a friend who has one, or what's his name? A friend who has one, or perhaps local hackerspace, makerspace libraries often have them, or there's places like Shapeways online that will print them for you, depending on what you need. Yeah, like Shapeways is pretty cheap, and Shapeways even offers stuff like printing in metal and whatever else if you want to go crazy. This is just ABS plastic. It's the same stuff that Lego bricks are made out of, so it's relatively safe enough. So assembling it all, it looks like an absolute mess inside here. This is again to show that all the wires have to be that long, so there's flex in them, so that way I can get all the parts assembled by hand. Even still, some assemblers buy like chopsticks to get things plugged in. So then I can put the case on around it. So yeah, just there's a good example of how if something is a messy hack, but it works, still do it. Like, if you get the end result, don't care about how it works. Like, whatever it takes to get the end result, and don't compare people's highlights list with behind the scenes, because behind the scenes most electronics and things whatever else look like that on the inside. Yeah, this goes to where are we? Okay, so just to show that it actually does work like that, you can see them lit up, and you can see like with the LEDs all lit up at once, like that looks almost like a random array of LEDs. It doesn't look like there's any pattern in there. So the diffusers and the gaskets do a pretty good job of making it look better. Oh no, my phone accidentally changed tabs, whatever else, apps rather. Okay, so yeah, so once that's all done, putting it in a case. Cases like this look complicated, but there is a website that I'm going to even actually put the URL there. Boxes.py they call it. It's a Python script. It will generate boxes for you on the fly. Like, you tell it the height, width, and what type of box you want, and then you get giant numbers. It'll just give you an SVG to do that. So it's SVG, so you can scale it to whatever you want, vector cutting, whatever else. Yeah, so creating this box was as simple as maybe 30 seconds on that website, just putting in the details. They have like 80 different types of boxes on there too, so you can pick all sorts of display ones or fancy things. They have extra stuff like racking. They have living hinges, if you've ever seen some of them. They have stuff like gears and shelving and rack mount equipments. So absolutely, yeah, check boxes.py if you want any shape of a box like that. You can customize everything, but it has pretty good details on it as well. And yes, in case anyone asking, lasers are awesome. Okay, so where are we? Next thing up is you got to program all this stuff. So we'll go with the hardware first on these. There are so many hardware things out there that I'm just going to pick 3 and that I recommend as a starting base. We have the Arduino Uno, which is one of those things you'd search for because the Arduino community is great for beginning stuff. This is the Uno is an older model, but I recommend it as a beginners just because it's really easy. The one I use specifically in this chronometer is the Wemos D1R2, because this one is made out of a tiny little board like that then there's a big board on the outside while you're prototyping and whatever else. And you can use just that tiny little thing by itself so long as you take care of power supplies and whatever else. But that has built-in Wi-Fi. And I'll say like the Arduino Uno is like $10. It's great for things if you have a lot of stuff to connect because it's got so many pins on the tops and bottom that are actually active. A lot of the ones on the Wemos aren't actually active down here and whatever else. So $10 for the Arduino Uno, but the Wemos for the tiny little unit is $3.50, and that has full Wi-Fi support. So you can do full integration with Google Home, Alexa, Siri, or whatever else, voice control if you want. You can do some really crazy stuff. So like this clock, the way it works is it connects to the local Wi-Fi and then does a geolocation lookup to figure out where it is in the world, then does a lookup to see what the time zone is and where it is, and then does some pings to some local time servers on the internet to get the local time, and then averages between them, whatever else. And that is not a huge amount of code. I'll show you some stuff of that later. But having Wi-Fi functionality adds so much features. But if you want more features, there's the Raspberry Pi 4. That has basically, you can run like a full desktop computer on that. That has HDMI output for full videos. It'll emulate things like the PlayStation 2 era consoles and backwards, so it's quite fast, that one. Raspberry Pi is $35 to $55 depending on what you want. So that's not breaking the bank, particularly given how fast it is. But after you've done all this, you need to actually get the code onto it. And coding is one of those things that, I'm not going to lie, it's probably the most difficult part in this thing. But it's still one of those things that it's not too hard to get your head around if you just compartmentalize everything. So this is a simple sketch that's designed just to blink an LED on, off, once a second on, once a second off. And on the left, you can see I've got all the comments put in there. But on the right, I've stripped all the comments out just to the actual code, and you can see like it's almost nothing. So you can read the comments on the left and see how things work and whatever else, or you can just look on the right and like, say we want to make this light blink twice as fast. And I'm like, well, I don't know what all this, let me just go back. I don't know what this all means up here and everything. But looking down here, the comments, we have turn the LED on, okay, and then wait for a second, turn the LED off, wait for a second. It says 1,000, I don't know what that is, maybe that's milliseconds or something. So we make it 500 each of them and then recompile and run. And oh look, the LED now turns on and off twice as fast. You don't actually have to know what a digital write is or the LED built in or high or low or pin mode or void loop or void setup. You don't need to know all of that. You just figure out what you need from the comments, take that one thing and then modify it, and then you're good to go. There's a lot of resources online to help learn coding these days. In particular, I recommend things like Code Academy or the, what's the other ones that I recommend? Khan Academy as well. If this is too much for you, though, there is visual drag and drop ones that are like Lego blocks. So things like XOD or Visuino or Ardublocki, you don't have to type a single line into any of those ones. You just drag and drop and draw lines between everything and connect them to all together. Yeah, this is probably it. And I also guarantee that if you learn one programming language, the next programming language you ever learn is definitely going to be easier. Like, it just gets easier with time because, you know, they work often very similar in a structural way. And I honestly think that learning a programming language is easier than learning a foreign language like Japanese or something, which is quite different from English. But that's just me, you know. Okay, so let's go back just now before we get too far away and keep on topic. Here's just another primer on Dunny time, whatever else, since, you know, people ask, like, why is there 4 displays? Well, technically there was 5 units in Dunny time, and so I'm just combining things because the top 3 units all have divisible by 5 instead of 25. Yeah, this is just, I'm just chucking the slides here, but I just want to say like an interesting thing, if you didn't catch it in my presentation that I did many years ago, the conversion between 2 systems lines up exactly on the 21st of April 1991 at 9:54 a.m. is the start of the Dunny year 9647, because that is the date of the file creation timestamp on the hypercard stack that eventually became Myst. So that's how Rawa decided the time would be for that. Speaking of time units, given that I define the length of 1 second and whatever else in my past one for the mechanical clock, I spoke to Rara about a few things, because I want to make the clock just random digits. I want it to actually be like ratios of a span of Dunny units of length. But we've never known the length of a span before. And so I asked Rawa what was the length of the span, because Booker T. Ana says this and that one, whatever else. And apparently Booker T. Ana is wrong and no one has told him before. The estimate that it throws of about 40 feet, I think, is it's completely wrong. So Sai never actually had an accurate reference for this. So he said, what do you think it should be? So many years ago, I wrote some software that finds mathematical coincidences. And I've generally found that if you try to search for a 1 in a million combination, if you search a million tries, you find a 1 in a trillion answer. So I found a really good conversion. I didn't just want to have a random number. I want to have an explanation for why they used that number. So the actual formula that I came up with, or rather the software came up with, is create a pendulum that swings back and forth in 5 Dunny seconds. Double the pendulum's length, so the full circle that the pendulum swings around, and you get 5 spans. So this number has this thing has the number 5 in it twice, and it still creates basically the right answer for what he was looking for. The actual answer, if you want the raw digit, is 1 span is 4.8 tutors, around 15.8 feet. That is official, finally released. We now know how long 1 span is. So that's calculated based upon the local gravity estimated underground in New Mexico and everything like that. So it's a lot behind the scenes. I'm not going to go into all of that. But the thing is that when I ran this program, it found all sorts of other stuff that I just found interesting. So I'm just going to have to touch on these because they're just too crazy coincidences. Let's see how much I can break your brains. So say you're standing on a desert island with a watch. Like, if you've ever done a physics course, the textbooks come up with things like that. Basically, you create a big triangle in the sand or whatever else. It takes you 10 seconds to walk across these 2 lines. This line going across that one takes you roughly 10 Dunny seconds. This is basically as accurate as you can walk. You can convert between our time and Dunny time using Pythagoras triangles. Like, this is just a coincidence. It just happened to be. You can make this 100 seconds either side and 100 per round, and it will still work. So as much accuracy as you want. It's absolutely crazy. But wait, there's another one that I also discovered. So say you're standing by some cliffs with a watch. Basically, find a cliff that's height. It takes 5 of our seconds for the rock to hit the bottom. Maybe you're halfway down the cliff or something like that. That distance is 10 spans. So you can use your watch and a cliff to convert from our times to Dunny units. So pretty much, if you've got our watch, one of our watches and nothing else, you can create all the Dunny units of measurement just from basic measurements like this. And again, this includes the number 5 and 10 in it as well. I couldn't believe that I managed to find coincidences like this that actually had numbers like that in it. So who's confused right now by how these things are actually working? Anyone? Amazed? Okay, better rephrase. Whose brains have I broken so far? Okay, so here we are. Next one. Okay, so let's look at the actual raw conversions between these 2 systems. These are designed on the mean solar tropical year and whatever else. So it looks pretty boring like this. So we can go through a few of these numbers, and there's lots of digits in there. It's interesting to note that it's not entirely statistically random. By random, there's no zeros anywhere in there at all, when there really should be at least 1 0 by that point in time. So we keep going. I just need some water. So we keep going, and we see numbers like that showing up until we're still going, not seeing any patterns or anything like this. We get to 25, and nothing. But we keep going, and we're still seeing nothing, and then we get to 28, 39.0000068 seconds. All these zeros, they just appear all at once. That should not happen. That should happen like at around 10 million pro run is what that should happen. But it happens at 28. So 29 dunny seconds is roughly 39, 28 dunny seconds is roughly 39 of our seconds. And roughly is so accurate that it's more accurate than a quartz clock could actually keep it. So if you had something on your watch from a quartz Rich Ross, you'd have to change the time for our time system more often than you would have to actually check for this conversion and update it for this conversion. Like, this is just a complete coincidence. There is no reason why that should be there, but it is. Like, none of this was planned. There is no mathematical explanation for it. It just happens. I think that's amazing, though. Okay, so back on topic after that distraction. Here's what it looks like all working. So for people who aren't, right in the front row and can't see it. Not working? Like, I haven't seen it. Like, what's happened? Oh, yeah, it's broken again on the interesting pattern. Yeah, I'll have to knock it over again. Well, yeah, so it's signal integrity between the microcontroller and the first shift registers controlling the dunny digits. That's pretty much all of that. Where are we? I'm just going to skip through some more here. So yeah, the total cost to make all of this was only around $100 US. Almost none of the components are specialized except for the digits. But it was very low-tech way to make them. There was nothing crazy. I didn't use vacuum chambers for the resin pours or whatever else. I just used my normal like table and everything, whatever else. It was entirely low-tech. So theoretically, this should all be doable. But just one thing I want to touch on before is a lot of people think that I just make these things. That's so far from the truth that it's completely wrong. So here's the original sketches for version 1 of this project and the circuit board diagram for version 1 that I was working on. I just have to get a vote of people's opinions of this. So the way we're going to do this is everyone, you put your hands up, and then I'm going to say how old the project is, and I'm going to keep going, and when you think that's that old, you put your hand down. So I'm just curious to see what other people say. This is my own curiosity, really. So everyone hands up. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We got 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half. We've got a few now. 2 years. Okay, getting there, maybe 30% down. 3 years. 4. We're now past halfway. 5. Almost everyone. 6. 7, almost gone. 8, 9, 10. Here we go. Still a couple holdouts. 11, 12. One more. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Oh my. 20, 21. 21. There we go. Okay. Okay, so everyone seems to think like maybe 3 years or so. Well, guess what? Here's the file modification dates of the very first version of this project. These are just the ones that haven't been modified since. So, that is kind of how long it took. But the thing is that back then, this was nowhere near as easy to build back then as it is now. Like you can literally see here, this is a map of individual transistors because I was basically building my own computer chips themselves from scratch because there was no easily available microchips that you could use. The 3 that I showed you earlier on, the Arduino is like 4 years old, the Wemos is only 2 years old, and the Raspberry Pi that I showed you is literally a couple weeks old. Things are getting easier all the time, and not just easier, but cheaper, more accessible, having more features. So even if you can't do something back then, you can do it now, or maybe in a couple of years. I should say I didn't work on this non-stop for 19 plus years, but this idea is old enough that it could vote. It's on and off that I've been doing with my projects back and forth. So I have some final words that I give on all these things. So this is just a back burner project for a very long time, but as a time traveler, I got to have a good clock on my wall. A couple things that I can give you just as some motivational hints, some extra advice, given I'm giving you resources, now I need to know how to do it. So first off, the quickest way to learn anything is to dive right in and have a go at it. maybe you won't get tangible results for a while, but racking up mental experience is very invaluable. Second off, failures are very important. You learn more from your failures than you do your successes, but never use either of them as a reason to give up or stop, because failure means you're making progress, even if it's just mental experience that you're gaining. In fact, don't just expect to fail, plan to fail. It is much easier to deal with failure if you know it's coming. You just don't know where or when or how, whatever else. But it's much easier to accept the setbacks and just keep going. When you're working in your tasks, the way you might have seen when you're saying some things before is you break everything up into smaller tasks. Everything can be broken down. If you don't know how to do something, learning is now your task. If you don't know how to break something down anymore, learning how to break it down is now your task. So you can keep doing these, iterating, and just one after another, nest them fractally, I think is the right phrase to use, or something like that. But you can have, I've had projects with literally hundreds of steps. Just don't get too bogged down in writing lists as you do it. And speaking of that, just so long as you slowly go through your lists, it doesn't matter how long it takes, you will eventually reach your goal. Patience and persistence and enthusiasm will get you almost anything. So I think that's it for it. So yeah, so I'm Mike Ando, and speaking as a time traveler, thanks for coming to my Bill and Ted talk. Let's go back. Whoop. Go back to that video. So, questions. We have questions and answer. I have over there, I haven't put them out yet, a whole table, a whole bags or whatever else of my failures and extra parts. So if you want to see what it looks like up close, given that this thing is sealed, you can go through that. Most of them actually you can take. If you want to make some artwork out of them or use it as solder practicing or whatever else, I have lots of stuff over there. You know, you can just integrate. You know, I'm going to be basically throwing them away. So I thought I might offer them to everyone around here. So I have at least some time for question. I'm not an expert, but I can, you know, have a go at answering your questions.
I actually just wanted to mention that if you want a ready-to-use 3D printer, check out your local community college's engineering club.
Oh yeah, sometimes they don't let other people use them, sometimes they do. Universities, colleges, clubs like that, libraries, hackerspaces, makerspaces, creative hubs, shared spaces like workspaces, they're all over the place these days.
Two questions. First, when can we order one of these? preferably, you know, decorated in Denny, you know, the Denny style. And secondly, do you know that the Denny digits are currently malfunctioning?
Yeah, I know they're currently doing that. I need to drop it on its back again or something like that. Yeah, signal integrity issues is what it's having. Yeah, it's the one I mentioned earlier. I could fix it, but it would take me like 2 or 3 hours, and I want to be with my friends right now.
As a time traveler, can you tell us exactly when the Netflix series will actually premiere?
I could, but then that might change people's expectations of it, and that would change the date that it's released. That's the one problem with time travel, is you can't impact impacting the present changes the future. So I can't say if I want to, you know, I've got to keep it as it is right now.
Even before it was malfunctioning, it was displaying some dunny digits that I'm not familiar with, including behind you right now, though it had been different in some slides than it is in what we're seeing right now, when it went from 24 with the 2 rectangles to an X for 25 to a single diagonal line to the dot for 0.
Yes.
And I'm wondering where the diagonal lines come from. Normally the X is a sort of a shorthand for 25, but the single diagonal line is unfamiliar to me, and it should choose between the dot for 0 or the X for 25. It should not include both, and it should not throw a single diagonal line in as another step with them.
Okay,
That's
so
getting to 27, folks.
Yeah, the animation that I showed earlier was just an animation of all possible combinations that the digits could display. So it included extra things. I don't think I included the infinity symbol in that one, but it was just all possible symbols it could display. This one right there, that slash like that, that is a slash that appears on Gen's pocket watch in Riven. It's basically like a wraparound symbol that means simultaneously both 25 and 0, the same as like 12 on our clocks also means 12 or 0 like that. I figured since this is a bit of a chronometer here, it should probably have both symbols. But you can see like on this display, where are we? This one there. Every so often it'll do 24, then it does the slash, then does 1 to have the full carryover. When it gets to a 23, 24, 25, and then 1 like that. Yeah.
Yes, but one of the earlier ones included them both.
Yeah, that was earlier prototype. I don't have up-to-date photos of everything on here, whatever else. I was like a lot of my photos and videos from older stuff, and I didn't have time to take them all in the latest version. I have photos and videos going back years of this thing.
One more question.
Is any of the code available online, such as on GitHub?
You probably don't want to see how bad my code is. Yeah, I probably won't post it fully publicly without properly fixing it up and whatever else. But if you want the code, I can just email it to you, something like that. Realistically, I don't want to say you should do it yourself, because code reusability is a really important thing. A lot of people. Yay! It's going to be on and off like that. So there's a thing in coding where if I say don't reinvent the wheel, people don't understand that correctly. Don't copy and don't retype something from one Word document to another when you can just copy paste. So just grabbing whatever code, basically anything you can find on the internet generally is in a license available for personal use. So if you can Google or Stack Overflow find how something's done, you can figure that out. The code on this, if you want to know how it's done, I can run you through it and I can send you a copy of the code. But I probably won't post it publicly until at least I have the blog post of everything else done.
So how long ago did you just?
We're out of time.
It was finished 2 days before I flew out.